Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. I'm back. I have moved house. I have no idea what the acoustics of this room are like. It is relatively empty at the moment, but I had a game of Infinity today for basically the first time in some time. I've had very little chance to game, but this game was a cracker. I had a really good time. I enjoy Infinity, and not being able to play it has sucked. Playing it was excellent. So what we're playing today is 300 points combined army versus 350 points Tartary army core with reinforcements, and the scenario is ITS Season 15 B-Pong. So on screen right now are both lists, the combined army list that I played and the Tartary army core list that I played against. This was just a casual game. It had actually intended to be part of an event, but we had a lot of last minute cancellations as life got in the way. I think I've never seen more cases of genuine reasonable cancellation for an event at short notice. So we reined it off, that's fine, and we just had some casual games instead. And this is the one that I got to play. So on the left we have my list, my combined army list. This is a revisitation of combined army, and I haven't really looked at Combined Army much, basically since, well, for some time, for like almost a year. They had a number of changes. They had some very justified nerfs to things like Imatron and Tiger creatures, but they are still very, very strong. But in particular, I haven't been looking at them because Reinforcements as Combined Army sucks. It's just deeply painful to do. Your reinforcement profiles are fine, like there is nothing wrong with the Exra, but unlocking the Exra uses one of the worst reinforcement models in the game. There's nothing wrong with Unidrons. In vanilla Combined Army, you have Unidrons. That's not bad, but it's a very expensive profile. You get no extra troops. Like, there's just nothing really to recommend playing Combined Army as reinforcements, other than that Extra are basically okay. They're not fantastic, they're just fine. Whereas 300 point combined army building like a honed and optimized list is really good, and I am really happy with this list. Obviously, since the point changes, the old list that I used with the Charontid and Anathematic doesn't work anymore. You can't quite fit anything, and I just sort of put that aside, deleted that with the changes, said I would come back to it in future. And this is what I've come back to. And what I basically, the change is, like, it's very, very similar in many respects. But what you lose is you lose the Anathematic. Now, the Anathematic is very, very good, but it turns out that Sheshkin is very, very good as well, and she's like 20 points cheaper. And when you have 20 points less spending on like some big luxury piece and you still get something as good as Sheshkin, you can fit some more stuff in there. So what we've got is we have the heavy machine gun Charontid. I've played a version of this list once before playing Panic Room, and I subbed out mostly for the memes the HMG Charontid with a plasma rifle substitute plus 1 order Lieutenant Charontid on the grounds that it would be quite funny in Panic Room. But realistically, the HMG Charontid MSV3 is just very, very good. It's very useful. It's very able to suppress a whole range of pieces that combined army generally doesn't want to fight. Like, I can smoke my way past a tag, I can hack a tag, etc., etc. Like, there are all sorts of things I'm happy to engage, but MSV3 with smoke shooting on a good platform, it can deal with camo ARO pieces, it can deal with linked ARO pieces. Obviously, there's no smoke shooting penalty, but it can isolate and engage them one at a time. It's just good, durable, reliable firepower that you want in a list if you can. Whenever I don't take it, it's one of those pieces I didn't used to take it nearly as much. I had other things that I would use, but I just like it here. We then have the Umbra Samaritan. This is one of the pieces that I was cutting from lists back when I was trying to make the Charontid and the Anathematic still work, but I'm very happy to put it back in because I have a Memnonica Lieutenant, and I like to have things to Memnonica into, and the Samaritan is excellent at that. And the Samaritan can just randomly carry games sometimes. Any good piece with Protheon can just randomly carry games sometimes. And this list has basically the two best pieces with Protheon. It's got the Umbra Samaritan, which is very good in CC and is very mobile and can Protheon its way through a game. And it has Sheshkin, which is very good and very mobile and very dangerous and can just Protheon her way through a game. So we have in Combat Group 1, we have those two potential carry pieces that can just get a kill and just get very, very strong. Then we have Bit and Kiss, because Bit and Kiss are outstanding. Then we have a Missile Drone, because in this list is much less likely to make missile plays than the previous version was, because it doesn't have a Whip 16 hacker. It's starting off with just Whip 14, which is fine, but it can make them, and those spotlight arrows are still very, very good. The T-Drone is still something that you want in this list. We've then got 2 Imatrons, an R-Drone, 2 Datarazi, and in Combat Group 2, we've got just enough points for a Greif Operator, which is a piece that can play big dividends. I might cut it, and the reason why I might cut it is that it's costing me 1 SWC. that could be a Libertos. There's no Libertos in this list, and maybe there should be, but I had enough points left by this making the Sheshkin anathematic to Sheshkin change that I could afford a Gryphop. And a Gryphop is kind of a cool, fun piece. It wouldn't do anything this game, but it is fun and it can just occasionally do things that are very useful, so it's in there for now. If it changes to a Libertos, I free up 13 points, which will probably upgrade one of the drones or something into something useful, but I'll figure that out when I get to it. We then have a Dartok hacker, so that is another spotlight-capable hacker. You're taking a missile bot, you want at least 2 things that can spotlight. Don't take just one, it's too susceptible to failure, and therefore rendering the T-drone useless. But also the Dartok, I mean, the Dartok is just insane in any case. It's an outstanding hacker for 21 points. It is nearly as good as Bit and Kiss, but it can spotlight. And it comes with another pitcher, so I have 2 pitchers in their list, which ups the info war a little bit, and then 3 Gakis. Gakis for 4 points are good and fun, and I can't afford Tiger creatures. So there we go, Gakis. I have no problem with Gakis. I like using them. They will fail dodges more than any other model in the entire game for me. I think Gakis fail dodges about as often as Imitrons do, but nevertheless, they're just useful. They're just useful for doing all sorts of warband things. Maybe they would get upgraded if I free up those points by cutting the Gryph operator down to a Libertos, but we'll see. I want to run fewer irregular orders these days because the changes to, it's not the changes to how command tokens are spent, but the new use of command tokens, O12 Prestige in ITS 15, means that you can't bear quite the same irregular load because you would take, if you take lots of irregulars, like if I could usually handle about 4 irregulars on the expectation that I would spend 2 or 3 command tokens over the course of a game, turning some of them into regular orders. But that's not something that you will do anymore because you'll just spend those command tokens generating regular orders out of thin air. So I want fewer irregulars. They're still fun. You can still run plenty of irregulars, but I'm pressured. I find myself pressed to maybe take slightly fewer in order to optimize a list. So if I put in the Libertos, I think it's relatively likely that perhaps one of those Gakis comes out. Maybe it turns into a Datarazi, then I've got, a few points left to upgrade Gakis to Tiger creatures or something, and that would be a fine list. Overall, though, I really like this. It's got very good gunfighting, it's got pretty good hacking, it's got warbands, it's got smoke shooting, it's very dangerous in close combat. This is just feels like generation 2 of my Charontid and Anathematic list, and I'm very happy with it. Playing against it, we have a Tartary Army Corps list, and this is Nick, a local player, coming back to the scene, and he is experimenting with a few things. And what I like that he's trying here is this reinforcements section. This is, in as much as there is a reinforcements meta, and I don't know if there is a reinforcements meta yet, and of course it's not even common to play reinforcements versus non-reinforcements, but as much as there is a reinforcements meta, you will usually see Ariadne reinforcements being, and I say usually as if I've played that many games in the last few weeks, but you will see things like Margot and Duroc, multiple Apaches, a Beast Hunter. There are some very, very good pieces, but what Nick has done instead is he's really tied his reinforcement pool back into how his main pool is going to operate. And what I mean by that is that he's got this Lion Kazakh link. This Lion Kazakh link is not intended to survive. The missile launcher is a disposable ARO piece. He will try and medikit things back if he can, but it isn't the intention. That AP heavy machine gun is intending to go and fight until it dies. And basically, the expectation is that the link will break and be rendered useless at some point during the game prior to the reinforcements arriving, at which point you have a 3 model link that can form as a Harris in that reinforcement section. And those moblots, they're expensive and they're single wound, but they have tactical awareness. That reinforcements group by itself is generating 4 orders if you count the tack aware, and you can form all 4 of those models up into a link, I believe. That is a legal Lugaroo link. So you have CC, you have an AP Spitfire with link bonuses, you have the moblot, Paramedic, which is for another attack aware and is a specialist, and then you have the Lugaroo. And then the comlink will jump over into that link list, and your reinforcements list your reinforcements pool is arriving with a pretty phenomenal 7 orders, all of which can be spent on a 4-person link. So a lot can be done with that. Like, this is probably, I think this may be the most order efficient reinforcement pool I have personally seen, and that's very interesting, even if you compare this in terms of raw power to something like just Margot and Duroc, etc. and it doesn't have the same raw power as Durok just turning up and running into melee. But it's got plenty of melee. It's got the Apache. The Apache is excellent. It would actually make a pretty significant kill in melee this game. And so yeah, the risk is that the AP Spitfire +1 damage moblot just goes down in a blaze of glory to a bad crit and fails multiple saves and dies. But if it doesn't, then at least you've got a paramedic, etc. So I like that. The rest of the list I do think could potentially use some work. And those who have been looking at the screen while I've been talking have probably noticed the Ratnik link. I'm not 100% sold on. I actually don't hate that Ratnik profile at all, but I don't think it necessarily warrants being a Harry's team. Yes, you can get up to Panzerfaust, like you've got the Panzerfaust, the Flammensphere, the AP Spitfire. The Spitfire gets to burst 6 with the Harry's team. But the Panzerfaust and Flammenspears do not, for practical purposes, benefit from the Haris bonuses because they don't have enough shots to fire 3 shots. So you're not getting better than +1 burst on them anyway. And there isn't, mechanically speaking, a massive difference between burst 6 and burst 5. It does exist, but you hit diminishing returns. Burst and ballistic skill and visual mods all sort of scale proportional to each other. And if you want to think about this in sort of like a very abstract way, ballistic skill 0, burst infinity is useless, right? Ballistic skill 1, but yeah, etc. So the better your ballistic skill is, the more adding burst matters. The better your burst is, the more stacking mods matters. They scale relative to each other. And that means that adding burst on top of burst on top of burst to a Ratnik, which is, BS13 with no visual mods, 5 is good enough for a piece that's already doing certain things. Now, the Vet Kazakh I do like. It is expensive, but a Vet Kazakh paired with a Ratnik, I think is cool in a very kind of luxury way. With the T2 rifle and the heavy pistol and the light flamethrower, you're covering certain ranges that the Ratnik doesn't necessarily want to fight at. So the Ratnik and the Veteran Kazakh can push up as a unit and fight in a sort of efficient way. And the Veteran Kazakh is a fairly good specialist at whip 14 and is just generally a good piece. I like those together with the note that this is very expensive. I just don't like the front of it. If you cut the front of it, you would be able to do something like begin to afford Colonel. You'd be able to shuffle some points around and afford Colonel Veronin. And Colonel Veronin, I think, would be a really good idea. Colonel Veronin would give you an extra command token. Command tokens go very far in ITS Season 15 with the O12 prestige. I just like Colonel Veronin a lot. He could be added into links. You wouldn't necessarily want to, but you could, for example, have him maybe jump into the Lion Kazakh link, where he does, I believe he counts as a Line Kazakh for purposes of a pure core, so it would give you a 6-member, or even you just put him in the Line Kazakh link in place of the current obvious lieutenant, and then you use the spare points there to get something like an Armandino. And other sorts of smoke in this would be very good. Now, just counting through, one of the things I would say is that this list, I think, could take more troops. We've got 8 in the first combat group, 4 in the second, and 4 in the third, for a total of 16 troops, and you could take 17. And there's really no, like, it's Tartary Army Corps. To my knowledge, they have no parachutists. No, they do. They have, I'm wrong. They have the Murdering Bastard Night Vision Goggles, Spetsnaz. They have Spetsnaz parachutists. So you can play one troop down to fake out a Spetsnaz. Uh, I didn't even think of that this game. It's been too long since I played. I'm just like, camouflage markers. I assume that there's stuff. But I would go to, even if you just find 3 points and get a war core in there, you can probably do that. And you've got enough regulars right now that the war core you might even use to convert their orders occasionally. Combat Group 2, we have 2 Strelocks, one's a specialist, one's not. No Mine Layer, just 2 Strelocks. We have a rando old Tractor Mule for 5 points, lovely choice, can't go wrong with that. And then Carmen and Batard, outstanding use of 18 points, totally fine, always good in every. In fact, you probably should just take Carmen and Batard in every single Tartary list. So in terms of things that are missing, and by the way, am I a little bit nasal in this video? It's because I've moved house and the entire house is still full of dust and we're still cleaning everything, and so my hay fever is insane if I begin to sniffle or anything. But sorry, the only thing that's missing here really is warband play, and as Tartary you have no reason not to add some warbands to a list, and especially playing B-Pong, which was one of the scenarios that we were intending to play at the event that got called off today. Armandinos are outstanding. Armandinos are an 8-point specialist that gets itself up the board with its own smoke. And B-Pong, the way that I find it tends to play is that there has to be a sacrificial. There sometimes have to be multiple sacrificial specialists. The whole board is important to play, but you will get points if you can just get something to that objective and begin to huck it forward. So Ermandinos are outstanding, and it would have been very, very good to have one in this list. Overall, though, I like many of the basic concepts, and in particular, I like how the reinforcement section is integrated with a battle plan as part of the main list. It's intending that the Line Kazakh link will not survive, or maybe that the Ratnik and Bet Kazakh link will break, but that those Lugaru and Moblots and Apaches can turn up linked with 7 orders and go ham. Now, did it actually work out that way? We will see. Let's get to the actual game. So, with a Whip 16 Lieutenant, by the way, in terms of classifieds, I've rolled telemetry. Outstanding. Always happy to see that. As a spotlight capable army, it's basically free. I believe it exists. We are playing with the old classified decks. Our new ones have not arrived yet, but to my knowledge, telemetry still exists in the new classified deck, despite the fact that it's a freaking travesty that it's a classified in Infinity N4. But anyway, it could easily have been replaced with, at least make it more difficult, for God's sake. But anyway, soapbox aside, I have won the role with 16 Lieutenant. That will often happen, and I have elected to deploy second on the right side of the table. My opponent Nick has done the ballsy play, and I don't think it's a bad idea. I think in B-Pong it's not the worst thing to do, and he is elected to go second, just hard go second. Now against combined army, that's particularly bold, but so like B-Pong is a game mode where the scoring is not just end of game. I will usually not hard go second ever. Actually, usually won't do it, but I will particularly not hard go second if the scoring is end of game. But if the scoring is end of round, consistently end of round, and there are only a few scenarios that actually do that, Supremacy, for example, but B-Pong is one of them, it can be worth just being like, it's just easier to play a scenario-oriented game if I'm going second, so he just hard went second. And that put me in an interesting spot, because obviously I can now deploy to maximize my offensive potential, but I have to do something about the scenario. So Nick deploys first, and what we can see is a pretty heavy, intentionally heavy ARO piece. And this is part of where he is getting some benefit out of the Haris team bonuses, because he's got the Ratnik over here on ARO. This is an open-ish table. We've got some solid high ground, etc., etc. There's a fair bit of line of sight. And so we've got in B-Pong, we've got the comlink, or the antenna here, and then underneath this bridge is the actual the B-Pong objective. So the Ratnik is watching it with Burst 2 on its Tammenspear and Panzerfaust. We have the veteran Kazakh looked back here. No, the paramedic looked back. No, veteran Kazakh looked back here, and then the front of Vicky on the ground over here. The front of Vicky is not hiding that much. It's hiding. The vet Kazakh is hiding at the moment. They're kind of watching out this direction, but not really. They are not on ARO, but the big guy is. Then we have both the APHMG and the missile launcher on hard ARO, watching pretty much most of the high ground. Anything that is on high ground will be able to see both. And then their brothers are spread out behind them. So we have the paramedic on the rooftop back here, the obvious lieutenant on the rooftop here, and the comlink on the ground back here. We then have 1, 2, 3, 4 camouflage markers, which, with the exclusion zone in place in this scenario, they read as, yes, they're probably Strelocks, but what kind of Strelocks? They are positioned in a way, they're close enough together that they could be a Strelok mine layer and like a scout or something, but realistically my expectation is 2 Strelocks, and then 1 reserve. And so I can sort of see everything already. I can deploy with pretty near perfect information. And so what we've got on my side is I've deployed for some aggro warband play. So we've got, because I can see where all of my opponent's stuff is, we've got 1 Yaki here that will be able to move in this direction without getting shot, 1 Datarazi here that will be able to move in this direction without getting shot. We've got, and then 2 in this alleyway back here. We've got 2 more Gakis that can both make the run here. Now, once they reach the midfield and start moving sort of around these angles, yeah, they're going to get gunned down by the aero pieces, but they can move forward and take space safely. We also have then a second Datarazi here, and this Datarazi is there exclusively to throw smoke for the big guy. So the Chirontid has done something that I will occasionally do if I'm going first, and that is to be very, very aggressive. Because I can throw smoke in front of him, I can split my shots. Like, I don't have to fight all of these ARO pieces at once. I can fight them at my discretion, picking them off one at a time through the smoke. And that is the game plan here. Otherwise, we've got Sheshkan hanging out way back here. She's on the flank, but she's very fast. Her hope is to maybe move up this direction. And then we have the Umbra Samaritan back here, Bit and Kiss on this rooftop with a deployable repeater nearby, and then the Dartok is here. Now, I haven't played in, like I said, they had one game in like the last month. This Dartok is deployed with the best of intentions, but it is a mistake. It's a mistake that I won't get hugely punished for. But I mentioned that we've got the central objective in B-Pong. In my limited experience with the scenario, you want to get it across the line and make it your opponent's problem to huck back. Because if you properly yeet it forward, it can be very difficult for them to get it far enough back without spending two. You can at least prevent them from scoring easy points, and that usually requires a sacrificial specialist. And the Dartok was my cheapest specialist alongside Bit and Kiss. I should have used Bit and Kiss, not the Dartok. And the reason for that is that the Dartok is in Combat Group 2, which is just not generating that many orders. And I won't be punished for this, but an opportunity Nick had, if he had identified that the Dartok was going to make that run, is to take orders from Combat Group 2 and just completely nullify it effectively, which would have given like Sheshkin and the Chirontid full 10 orders, 11 orders to go nuts with, 12 orders to go nuts with. But yeah, just something to know. Anyway, so then Nick deploys as his reserve, Carmen and Petard. They are deployed in underneath, sort of, there's all of this stuff here. The Chirontid is not going to be able to get to them. And then I deploy the Greif operator here, looking at Carmen and Petard. Again, a mistake. So this is where the Greif operator can operate, it can operate totally fine on a very limited order pool because it deploys in position to attack. And what it could have done is done like first short skill discover, second short skill burt and shoot a whole bunch of things, except that the Dartok is going to need every single order in this combat group. I should not have deployed it here, given that it was never going to be able to spend orders. But I failed to identify that it would not be able to spend orders because I just wasn't thinking. It had been too long since I played the game. Oh, quick note also, we have one Imatron back here and one Imatron back here. They won't suffer anything during the entire game. They will be happy little Netrods. So I am going first, and Nick takes orders. Fortunately for me, he takes orders from my first combat group. So I'm running with 8 orders in my first combat group, 2 regular and 3 regular in my second, and all of the impetuous goes forward. And then we just commence dismantling the ARO pieces. So Dadarazi hooks some smoke down there, and Burt begins. And the Charonted is positioned because, again, I was able to deploy after Nick despite going first. It's deployed in positions where I can discover this guy and then shoot this paramedic, which will actually fail. The range is terrible, but this reveals this guy to be a Strelok. Then I discover this guy and shoot this paramedic. And what will happen effectively is that I'm not actually able to do what I want to do to both of these initially, except that as part of a coordinated order, moving some things forward, Sheshkin just decides she'll do it herself. So she comes up and around. I think she takes one face-to-face roll. She gets onto the ground level console over here. She gets around to there, and she takes out, I want to say, the missile launcher and the HMG. I'm not ever able to deal with this paramedic, I don't think. Maybe I do. And then we put down basically this Strelok, and we can't kill this Strelok. It just doesn't die. I think it passes 4 armor saves. And that's pretty much the entire first combat group. So that's not bad. It's 1, 2, I only get 3 kills. The paramedic lives. But I get 3 kills, and that's fine. They're on some big guns. The Ratnik is left totally alive. And no, I don't kill the missile launcher. The missile launcher resists all attempts to destroy it. That's right. So the missile launcher is alive. The HMG goes down. The paramedic goes down. HMG goes down. The paramedic goes down, and this Strelok goes down. I only get 3 kills on the first turn, but I do, in terms of progressing the scenario, get Sheshkin and Agaki onto this objective, and I get smoke up here with the second Adarazi. Smoke goes down there, and this Dartok goes whoo, gets around the B-Pong objective into base contact on the far side, and then like hucks it over and gets it to there. And then he sits there and waits for death because I don't have enough orders left to exfiltrate him. So that is not a terrible first turn, and it has, I mean, it's like 3 casualties, etc. But I was I was going first from a deployment advantage against an opponent who had reinforcements, therefore had fewer points than me to start with. 3 casualties was probably not enough, particularly when those 3 casualties were a 20-point Strelok forward observer, a 20-something point HMG, and a 13-point or a 11-point paramedic. It's not a great deal, but game of two halves, and ARO will serve me just fine. So, Nick Impetuous's Carmen and Batard up and around here, and I really can't I just can't let them go on a kill run. So Sheshkin shoots at Carmen, and the Greif Operator reveals and shoots at Carmen. Carmen splits her chain rifle burst. She will knock the Greif Operator unconscious. She will fail to wound Sheshkin, and Batard will throw his trench hammer at and fail to injure Sheshkin. Carmen goes down in Impetuous, so she leaves her irregular order behind, which I don't think will be spent. And look, I'm happy with that. Carmen has already killed a Greif Operator. She's already traded up. She spent 0 orders to do it. It is unequivocally a good trade for her to have done that. But she's dead. She's not going to rip my Empire army to shreds. She's not going to kill Sheshkin. She's not great at killing Sheshkin, but she's not going to kill Sheshkin, and I'm happy. That's totally fine. Nick then puzzles out what is the best way to put this Chirontid down, because his HMG is dead. He could fire a Burst 2 BS-12 missile launcher versus a Burst 14 Chirontid, and if he succeeds, he will rip me up. But that's not a fantastic face-to-face roll. In fact, that's probably worse than a coin flip, and he might have to try and succeed twice. And if he fails, that's bad. So what he does instead is he can get there's a you can see how these bridges are this shape, like this. So what that means is that this bridge here is actually it's just putting a line in between the Chirontid and the Ratnik. And so the Ratnik Haris is able to move forward. Now it has to leave the veteran Kazakh behind because if he stands up, he will get shot. He's on this rooftop here. But the Ratnik can move up and around. It will annihilate this poor Dartok, and then it will keep moving in this direction here and here. It will use O12 Prestige to spend an order, and then it will basically take this staircase. Now the Ratnik is too fat to stand on the staircase, but it can like vault up and vault back. And then it will go something like 4 rounds with the Chirontid. It will spend every remaining order in that combat group going burrt, 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 and it will on the last order kill the Chirontid, but not before it goes dogged, which means it dies at the end of the round. And the Chirontid goes whoop into the Umbra Samaritan, which has worked its way forward to about there. So I now have Whip 16 Umbra Samaritan. But the Chirontid is dead. But I have Sheshkin in this list, so I still have a pretty significant gun. There's not a great deal otherwise that Nick can do. This Strelok, which was revealed, is able to kind of like move up and forward, but all it's really able to do is go after Datarazi. So it goes after Datarazi, they trade, it dies, the Datarazi dies. That's a 14-point model down for me and a 16-point model down for Nick, which is not a terrible trade. Like, Streloks are good at doing that. Streloks are good at just being like, yeah, I took some orders from my opponent to reveal decoys, now I'll go and kill something and die. That's fine. But that's basically all it did. I think it actually should have just made a run for the objective and gone into suppressive fire. The argument against doing that is that the Datarazi would have probably been able to then impetuous around and chain rifle it to death. He would have killed the Datarazi would have killed it, but Datarazi would have generated an order. But in doing that, he would have scored a point because he'd have been controlling the objective. As it was, he didn't really get anything. So I get 2 points. I get 1 point for having the objective in Nick's half at the end of the round, and I have 1 point because Sheshkin is on this objective over here. So round 2, we can see some Garkis have wormed their way forward. This bridge is unfortunately obscuring a great deal of the action. You can probably see it's where the Dartok died, it's where the Strelok is hanging out. But importantly, this you can see that the B-Pong objective itself has been hucked forward. So I've got an Umbra Samaritan hanging out down here, who is Whip 16, thanks to the Chirontid inhabiting its brain, and it's time to secure a classified. So the Samaritan is going to come around here. It's going to spotlight this guy and then dunk up onto here. But obviously it will not do that first because there is a missile launcher in the way, which means that Sheshkin has to do her thing. So Sheshkin will move up, and Sheshkin, like the Samaritan, will spend some orders this turn. It will spend, I think it will spend 2 orders, a lieutenant order and 1 regular order. But this is going to mostly be the Sheshkin Shongan dance. I do consider trying to get something into base contact with this, but I am ticking points ahead, and Nick says, I don't actually do the math on this, but Nick is like, oh, my reinforcements are already arriving. And I think if I'd stopped to think about that, if he hadn't said anything, I would probably have recognized that, because the Ratnik in particular going down, and with the Carmen, the Ratnik, and the Strelok is already close to, not quite, but it's close to, and with this guy down, it was like, yeah, okay, cool, you've begun to tick over. So it's what I need to do this turn. I know Nick's reinforcements are arriving next turn on round 2. If you can predict that reinforcements are incoming, particularly because your opponent took enough casualties in their active turn to flip them over by the end of their active turn, then a very, very good play to make is what I did this turn, which is to go straight for an LT kill if you can arrange it, because reinforcements arriving, even Nick's reinforcements arriving in Tone of Lost Lieutenant can go a very long way. So this is going to be mostly the Sheshkin song and dance. She's going to come up and around here, inside short range, inside 24. She's going to just annihilate this missile launcher. Now she could have died here. She definitely could have. A missile launcher can always just randomly roll well and kill something, but it couldn't fire templates as I was too close to a friendly model. And indeed, what Sheshkin does next is walk into combat with and eat 2 wounds off of the inert Batard. So she's now on full juice. She has 4 wounds, and she comes up and around here and begins to kill. Now, she exchanges a little bit of fire. We've got the front of Vicky back here. Behind this Ratnik, I took a picture of it, but it's actually dead. And the veteran Kazakhs are over here. She changes some fire. She puts the front of Vicky down, and the veteran Kazakh almost flash pulses her, but she makes both BTS rolls, guts around this way, comes around here, eats the Kazakh, and then up onto the rooftop and eats the Kazakh lieutenant. So she's going to end up prone, hanging out basically up here. But I now know that Nick is also lieutenant, and one of the issues, right, with this list is that it's got one obvious lieutenant because he couldn't really find points to add in a decoy, etc. And that's one of those things that maybe you could include if you didn't have the front of Vicky in the veteran Kazakh slash Ratnik race. So Sheshkin, that obviously takes a lot of wounds, but that is a tear. And we really I'm like, okay, cool, Lieutenant is down. I've defanged as much of his list as I can. It's really not that much left. There's a tractor mule hanging out back here and this veteran Kazakh. I can't really fight it, but I've done what I can. Let's just sort of secure some points. So this is when the Umbra Samaritan moves around here, spotlights the unconscious Strelok, and then it jumps up to here and goes prone. So the halfway line is basically there. What I'm trying to do with him is set up kind of like a good little sort of like area where he can't, like, he can hack things particularly if Nick starts landing reinforcements in this space with the intention of moving the objective forward. I want to lock the objective in place. And so I wouldn't actually be surprised if Nick's reinforcements can kill my Samaritan, for example, but it will be challenging for them to do that and also progress the objective. So sure enough, Nick's he's also a lieutenant. His reinforcements arrive, they all drop pod down onto this rooftop, and they form up as a link. And they have 2 tactical awareness orders, and he has some command tokens spare, so they can still play honestly a pretty effective turn. Now, remember there are exclusion zones, so Nick can't really deploy beyond sort of there. That's the exclusion zone that he's working with, but that is still enough. As the first tactical awareness order, the AP Spitfire moves around. It gets just far enough forward that Samaritan is stripped of cover because a Silhouette 2 is just high enough to deny cover to a model on this building, on this bridgeway, and just lights the Samaritan the hell up. I miss my dodge. I need a 15. I completely fluff it. He gets me from outside of hacking area, so I can't respond with a spotlight. And one shot just takes the Samaritan all the way to dead. But in doing that, he has had to zone this little team sort of further out this direction. He then uses the tactical awareness on the paramedic to shift some things around and engage the Gaki down here, and he kills it just fine as well. Then he begins to have to break the team up, basically. They spend their own orders. So the Apache jumps down to here to score a point off of the objective, and then he does something that is very ballsy. It doesn't have a great chance of success, but it isn't terrible. He has the Lugaroo with the adhesive launcher vault up onto these boxes and then back down. And that lets him see Sheshkin prone on this rooftop and fire an adhesive launcher. Now, when Umbra over here died, I jumped into Sheshkin, which means that Sheshkin is now Whip 16 Lieutenant, and if he adhesives me, I'm not in loss of lieutenant, but I can't use my lieutenant order on this many wound murder piece. It's a reader repulsor, I'm trapped situation. So fortunately, however, he fails. The roll is inconclusive. He wins the face-to-face roll, but Sheshkin is 15. She's 15, so she passes adhesive rolls just under half the time, and she's fine in this particular case. That is most of what Nick can do. He is, trimming away at my forces. I've sustained a lot of casualties at this point, a great deal of damage. The Dartok is down. The Samaritan is down. Most of the Garkis are down at this point. I think I have one left. No, even it's down because it ran around. It ran around here, and then it was killed. So even it's dead. I think all the Garkis are dead. I've got one Dadarazi still alive, hanging out in this sort of space here. I actually roll into my final turn with just some drones, some Imitrons, Bit and Kiss, and Sheshkin. But It is a mini wound Sheshkin, and she is my lieutenant, and I have just the one command token left. And Nick's in position where Sheshkin can sort of kill the Marvel Universe. Also, when the round ends, I'm still securing. I'm not securing either console, but this is still in Nick's side, so I'm on 4 points because I did my classified. He's controlling it, so he's only on 2. It's difficult for him to come back at this point, and Sheshkin just sort of stands up and goes, and kills everything. Because she's Sheshkin, she's very good at that. She's very dangerous. She has sufficient orders. She comes down around all the way around here. All that's left, she doesn't. She gets stunned halfway through this kill run by the bloody veteran Kazakh and gets into base contact with the objective, but isn't able to kill the Apache. And so, although I didn't take any pictures of it, Nick does have a third turn, but all he does in that third turn is spite kill Sheshkin. So, what happens is he's only got a few orders. He spends the LT order on the veteran Kazakh to move around and shoot Sheshkin, and he takes off 2 of her at that point 3 wounds. And then he spends a regular order and it's an inclusive face-to-face roll, and then he activates the Apache and runs around into close combat. And the first face-to-face roll is inconclusive, and then he spends his last command token for O12 Prestige order. And with the last order, basically that he has, because everything's in different groups at this point, the last order, the Apache versus Sheshkin face-to-face roll is quite even. The Apache is rolling 2 dice on 22s. Sheshkin is rolling 1 dice on 25s. The Apache gets a hit through, and that hit does the last wound to Sheshkin, which puts her unconscious into spawn embryo, but she's not contesting the objective anymore, and so the game ends. I get 1 last point, putting me to 5 for having the objective in the center area, and Nick gets 1 last point, putting him to, I think, 3. So a very close game. I wasn't sure how this would go. Like I haven't been playing for a little while, but Nick is not not a tournament. Like he's a wonderful person and he plays enough to be quite proficient, but he's not like a CanCon attendee, Novacore attendee player. He just he just plays because he's good at the game, and I wasn't sure how this would go. And on paper, like you would think 300 points combined army going first with deployment advantage feels like it should rip the guts out of a reinforcements list. And it's interesting that I didn't. And it's sort of like, particularly, I mean, I don't think this tack list was hugely optimized. I like it, and I like that it has a plan for its reinforcements. But 3-5 with like a pretty bloody game for both sides felt closer than I thought it would be. I won enough to get a major victory, but then Nick also has the defensive bonus by getting within 2 points of me. This is a close fought game, and a close fought game off the back of some decisions that both players made. So that's interesting. I have thus far. This is the first game I've played where I've had 300 points into a 350 reinforcement list. And I've seen some people say that it should be pretty trivial for the 300 point optimized list to unpick the 350 point reinforcements list. And maybe I should have used more guided. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the first turn. I mentioned I made some mistakes, in particular on the first turn. I could have played things a bit more efficiently, a bit more lamely. Could have made some different choices. Could have just not had a Greif operator in my list and had a Libertos instead, for example. But it was a closer game, noting that I'm a little bit rusty. It's a closer game than I expected. It was a pleasingly close game. Like, it was back and forth. The Nick's third and final turn really was just sort of spite killing and scoring a final point. But even that final point mattered. So I actually really like this. It turns out I much enjoy playing 300 points. Not actually. Okay, so 2 points on that. Firstly, in all of this playing reinforcements, most of my games have involved either I've been playing reinforcements or they've involved reinforcements. It turns out that just 300 points infinity is a really good format. Hey, like, do we all forget that at any point? Like, 300 points infinity is fun as hell. I had that Panic Room game I mentioned was just 300 points versus 300 points. It was really, really enjoyable. I liked it a lot. And I sat there playing it after and just being like, this is great. I'm not sure. Like, I don't want to go back to reinforcements that much. And but this was better than playing reinforcements versus reinforcements. And I don't know if I've mentioned this on the channel because it's been a while since I've done a video, but I have been putting my mind to the like, why am I not super enthusiastic to play that many more reinforcements as written games? And the conclusion I actually came to, if I haven't mentioned this before, was that it feels like playing a mirror match where if you think about Actually, a lot of war games, and even some other games like MTG, it's pretty common for players to be like, "Oh, I don't love the mirror. I don't love playing combiner versus combined army. I don't love playing Pano versus Pano versus Pano. Of course, Pano players love that. They get to play their ideal game. But I don't love playing Hack Islam versus Hack Islam as much as I like playing Hack Islam versus anything else. And that might just be a sensation that I feel maybe is unique to me, but it's something that I have always felt. And if I pick down into why that is, I feel like it's because we build a list, or we build an army, or we have a strategy where we have strengths that we're hoping to leverage. And it's most interesting when your opponent is doing something that is maybe equally powerful but asymmetric. Games of tactics and strategy are improved when both players aren't just capable of mirroring each other's moves, because the matchup is stripped down to more elemental elements, to luck or skill or whatever. But there's less testing of creativity, there's less novelty, there's less of those things that we really enjoy. I just don't love mirror matches. And what I found was that for a couple of reasons, reinforcement versus reinforcement games felt a lot like mirror matches. And I think there are two reasons for that. The first reason is that reinforcements lists generally tend toward similarity because they are very constrained in terms of how you structure them, which means that there will be more similarities between reinforcement lists, even of wildly different factions, than there would be between 300-point lists of those factions. So, like, combined army 300 points feels more like Pan-Oceania. So, combined army reinforcements feels more like Pan-Oceania reinforcements than combined army 300 points feels like Pan-Oceania 300 points. And then secondly, the play experience for reinforcements. You have, like, reinforcements shape the game in a certain way. You will have this play experience where you have reinforcements arriving, which is this reserve of strength. And when both players have that, the strengths that you are matching are more symmetric and less asymmetric. And so what I found after a bit of sort of like introspection about this, because I've had plenty of time to think about this, is that playing reinforcements versus reinforcements is like playing the mirror in just about any game. And playing 300 points versus reinforcements is not like that. And so for that reason, I actually am really glad that I played this game, and I've played a few games on both sides. Because while I'm not sure they're totally balanced, I really don't. I mean, I have not yet lost a game using reinforcements against non-reinforcements. I have not technically yet lost a game using 300 points against 350 with a very small sample size. But no, I have lost a game using reinforcements against non. I think that was one of the ones that, yeah, playing bloody Starco. Anyway, stuff that Starco list was terrible. Sabotage. But the point is that it's testing of asymmetric strengths again. It's that players have game plans that they're trying to leverage against their opponents using a different game plan, and it's greatly more enjoyable. Like I enjoyed this game more than I have enjoyed any reinforcements versus reinforcements mirror, and there is no slight on any of my opponents in those games. It's just that I don't love the mirror match in any particular game. I like to play against things that are different to what I'm playing and see if what I've got is better, if I can do it better than they can. If my ideas that have informed my list and strategy are superior to theirs, and you can't test that if you're like, oh, okay, well, you've got an avatar and I've got an avatar, so I wonder who's going to do better. Guess we'll see. Like, who goes first, who rolls better, who, etc. So, anyway, that's just a little bit of diatribe at the end of this particular video. This game was hella fun. It was hella fun because Nick is wonderful. It was hella fun because it was testing of asymmetric strengths in a really interesting way, in a good game with lots of dynamism and many things going on. And it was a good game because I haven't got to play in enough in ages, and this was great fun. So, I am still not set up at the new place. Unloading, unpacking takes freaking months. Who knows? I don't know how many more videos I'll be able to get in the near future, but I had a window to set this up. I have a computer on a freaking trestle table, but it will suffice. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this and you would like to support the channel, then in the link description you will see a link to buymeacoffee.com where you can support the channel either in an ongoing manner or in one-off donations. Generally speaking, I find that be able to make those one-off donations is a little bit more appropriate because I can't always guarantee uploads because, for example, I moved house. But we do have some regular supporters. Thank you very much to those people. For example, Alex, thank you very much for your ongoing support. Otherwise, as always, I hope you enjoyed this and I will see you all next time.